If the world were like a Sleep Number mattress, everything would adapt for your comfort. Your coffee would never get cold. Your flight would always be on time. And your mattress would always respond to you and your unique sleep needs. Sleep Number mattresses are designed to respond to your body and shift with your changing life, helping you fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. To experience a whole new world of comfort, visit a Sleep Number store or go to sleepnumber.com. Sleep Number. To a good life sleep.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything.
I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony Nippy Ames, and this is A Little Bit Culty.
We woke up from a cult, and that journey was captured in The Vow on HBO and in my memoir, Scarred.
Now, in this podcast, we break down the shame and secrets that make these experiences so destructive with honest conversations on how seemingly benign groups can cross into the cultiverse and how to spot and recover from trouble if it happens to you.
Each week, we bring in experts, survivors, and whistleblowers to explore red flags, resilience, and even share a few laughs, because sometimes you gotta laugh.
Subscribe to our Patreon for early and ad-free listening, some live Q&A, and exclusive content at patreon.com/alittleBitCulty.
Welcome to Season 8 of A Little Bit Culty. Hey everybody, welcome back to A Little Bit Culty. If you joined us on Monday, welcome back. And if you're just tuning in today, we are so glad you're here, but you may want to hit pause and go back to Monday's episode first. That's where we shared the preface, introduction, and chapters 1 and 2 of our new book, A Little Bit Culty, Navigating Cults, Control, and Coercion. So you'll definitely want to start there. This week, we are celebrating the release of the audiobook by sharing just a few chapters with our podcast community as a little summer bonus. And we want to say thank you again. So many of you picked up a copy of the paperback copy of the book when it came out, recommended it to friends, left reviews, and supported us every step of the way. Honestly, we could not be more grateful. And everyone's kept asking, when's the audiobook coming out? Yes, it is here. The wait is over. And yes, it's narrated by us. Recording the audiobook was a hoot. We laughed, we cried, we reflected, we revisited stories, we even add a little bit extra that's not in the book. So today we are bringing chapters 3 and 4. And if you finish today's episode and think, I need to know what happens next, we've got good news. You don't have to wait. The entire audiobook is now available wherever you get your audiobooks, so you can keep listening all the way through. So whether you've already read the paperback and you want to experience it in a new way, or you've been waiting just for this, or you're like us and have PTSD and can't read actual books, we hope you enjoy hearing the story in our own voices warms your heart as much as it warmed ours to record it. Thanks, as always, for being part of this incredible community. And now, please enjoy chapters 3 and 4 of A Little Bit Culty, Navigating Cults, Control, and Coercion. See you next time.
Chapter 3. What the hell is a cult anyway? Let's summarize so far. Bad news, you're not immune. Good news, you can build your immunity. And we're here to help. But first, what is a cult, you ask? Good question. Unfortunately, experts don't exactly agree on a definition. We found that really interesting as we exited NXIVM and started our healing journey. Despite how the media often portrays cults as large groups led by a magnetic figurehead tucked away in some compound in upstate New York, the reality is far more complex. Yes, that version exists, but it's only part of the picture. There's nuance. The fact that even experts can't agree on a single definition shows just how slippery the concept can be. In this chapter, we'll explore a few models and frameworks that helped us make sense of our own experience and that might help you sharpen your radar for spotting unhealthy dynamics, whether in a group, a relationship, or even at work.
Only weeks after waking up, which is the term people in the cult space use to describe how it feels when you suddenly realize that you were in a cult, and quickly leaving Albany, I was on a plane home to Vancouver with our son Troy, who had just turned 3. I had been deeply betrayed, was scared shitless, and hadn't slept or eaten properly in weeks. I was shaking from exhaustion and undiagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. I set Troy up on his iPad, and while he was absorbed in his favorite cartoon, I opened Dr. Stephen Hassan's book, Freedom of Mind. Just in reading the introduction to his book, my stomach flipped as I grappled with how I had become indoctrinated into a false identity as an obedient soldier for a cult. Holy shit. Dr. Stephen Hassan was our first podcast guest ever. He taught us how cults use deceptive tactics to recruit and keep members, manipulating them to stay loyal, obedient, and dependent. Cults deviously hide their true purpose and intention of exploiting you. Super sus. Dr. Hassan, a former member of the Unification Church, aka the Moonies, has dedicated his career to helping those affected by cults. He defines a cult as a destructive group with a pyramid-shaped power structure. Picture a leader, or a few, at the top calling the shots. Hassan developed the BITE model, which explains how cults and culty individuals use control over behavior, information, thought, and emotions to manipulate people. Cult leaders are devious and deceptive, which can make their coercive behaviors almost impossible to detect, even when you know what to look for. Hassan's BITE model describes the extremes of cultic behavior, but less extreme variants of the behaviors are also culty and should raise alarms. Let's break down the 4 categories. First, behavior control. Just like domestic violence situations, extreme cults run your whole life, what you do, where you go, or who you hang out with. In any setting, an intimate relationship, athletic team, college campus, or a cult, behavior control is abuse. Abusive individuals and groups have extensive rules and rituals. In NXIVM, it started small, bowing, taking off our shoes, and those ridiculous sashes. But it escalated. Daily commitments, mandatory check-ins with the upper ranks, and eventually, instructions about our sex lives. Second, information control. Cults create echo chambers. They cut you off from opposing ideas. In NXIVM, it wasn't as obvious as some cults where they completely isolate members from the outside world. However, we were told not to read or listen to any negative media about NXIVM or Keith, media that was already considered unethical and untrustworthy within the group, because that would change our thought object. NXIVM speak for, Keith is perfect, and don't you dare think differently. We were convinced to believe that he had good intent, and to consider otherwise was sacrilege. They created an almost impermeable bubble and desperately tried to control the information within it. If we read something negative and asked about it, we always got the same line. Well, was that your experience? Picture a tight smile and a head tilt right here. We knew that it wasn't a real question and that we'd regret not giving absolute praise. The epitome of thought control is outright deception. Arguably, NXIVM's leader's biggest crime was their lies that KR was a celibate genius and ethical humanitarian. These lies led the foundation for all the psychological, physical, financial, spiritual, and sexual abuse that followed. Sadly, people made major life decisions based on these lies. All cults are built on deception. Third, thought control. Cults don't want you thinking for yourself. They want you to parrot back their slogans and beliefs. They want you to doubt your reality and embrace their distorted worldview. This can include changing the meaning of words, even your name. In NXIVM, they used gaslighting as thought control, which we'll unpack later. They flipped every grievance back to us to make it our issue, never theirs. Ironically, we believed that we were learning critical thinking, yet we were being trained to never question NXIVM. Questioning the framework, that would get you feedback, aka public humiliation, or even punishment, which could affect your status in the company. Lastly, emotional control. This is an insidious layer. Cult leaders play on your emotions, your fears, your insecurities, your desires to belong, but they also play on your strengths, your loyalty, your compassion, your idealism, your intention to make the world a better place. Emotional manipulation can be incredibly damaging. Think love bombing, more on that later, guilt trips, future faking, the dangling of dreams, and the fear of being punished if you step out of line. In NXIVM, they pushed a science of joy rhetoric. If you experienced something other than rainbows and sunshine, you weren't working hard enough. If you had the full range of human emotions, complained, or expressed doubt or concern, then you were suffering. If you were in a bad state, you had to change it or get an exploration of meaning, a manipulative mini faux therapy session, cha-ching, that would help you become integrated with whatever issue you were having so that it no longer existed. And if we didn't embrace that toxic positivity, we were punished. And of course, they instilled fear of leaving, just like in religious groups where members are terrified that God will punish them with death or cancer or going to hell. We were convinced that if we strayed from the career path, we'd never be successful. Emotional control was most consistently achieved through fear of exclusion. If we left, we risked losing our NXIVM friends and family forever, knowing that we would be shunned as defectors.
Let's examine how the BITE model played out in our own NXIVM journey. I was running a Goals and Values Lab, GVL, in the New York City Center. One student had a goal of getting into business school, and he was also a NXIVM coach. Certified in teaching our curriculum, he was a bright guy and a great asset to the center. We constructed a meticulous plan based on the GVL structure, and a year later, he was admitted to Dartmouth's Tuck Business School. He took the NXIVM workshop to achieve a specific goal, applied the tools, and made it happen. He was ecstatic, and I was equally thrilled for him. Upon hearing this coach was leaving NYC to fulfill his dreams, a higher-ranking coach immediately questioned the decision. He said that the person leaving NXIVM was turning his back on his principles. He droned on about it being a breach of ethics, which would lead to the destruction of his conscience. He told everyone that attending business school was a selfish pursuit rooted in materialism and said that the student would never recover from leaving. I was pissed at this assessment and quietly disagreed. With my encouragement, the student left and followed his dreams. Sadly, not everyone could stand up for themselves in this coercive atmosphere. Many times, I was discouraged from pursuing my own goals outside of the organization. Looking back, this was a textbook example of the BITE model in action. The higher-ranking coach tried to exert behavior control by keeping him tethered to the NXIVM Stripe Path, a ranking system of growth, rather than letting him follow his own aspirations. It was also emotional control, using guilt and obligation to convince him he was betraying his values. In this instance, information control was less overt, but it was ever present in NXIVM. Members were siloed from outside opportunities and discouraged from exploring other personal development programs, leaving NXIVM the only personal path forward. Naturally, there was thought control at play, the demand that he adopt NXIVM's warped framework of ethics over his own pursuits.
Let's start with the concept at the heart of every coercive system: undue influence. Undue influence is excessive persuasion. It's manipulation that goes far beyond normal persuasion or healthy influence. It happens when someone uses deception, pressure, or authority to override another person's free will for their own benefit. The result is always inequity. The influencer gains power, money, or control, while the influenced person loses autonomy, resources, or even their sense of self. You usually see this dynamic in relationships with a power imbalance: a caregiver and an elderly patient, a financial advisor and a client, a teacher and a student, or, in our case, a so-called self-help guru and his devoted followers. In NXIVM, Keith Raniere didn't hold us down and force us. He made us believe that we wanted what he wanted. That's the trick of undue influence. It hijacks your sense of choice. We thought we were deciding freely, but the decisions were made inside an invisible box, built from lies, peer pressure, and manipulation. Unlike blatant brainwashing, which uses fear and isolation to overwrite your identity, undue influence works quietly. It slips in through charm, half-truths, and spiritual jargon dressed up as enlightenment. NXIVM's personal development language wasn't just semantics. It was a system designed to rewire how we thought and make us mistake control for growth. A big part of that system was language control. Every high control group develops its own vocabulary, special words and redefinitions that subtly reshape how members see the world. In NXIVM, we use terms like suppressive, life issue, and disintegration. Even simple words like good, bad, value, and self-esteem took on new meanings. That shared jargon made us feel like we belonged to something special. But it also separated us from anyone who didn't speak NXIVM. When your words don't match your family's words, communication breaks down. Eventually, you stop talking to outsiders because they don't understand. The new language becomes a filter, a way of thinking that keeps you tethered to the group. Even non-destructive groups like Pickleball with its kitchen lingo use jargon. Pay attention. Every group in this book has either its own special terms or subverts everyday language to manipulate victims. Here's the bottom line. When you're being deceived about a group's real intentions, you can't make an informed decision. You think you're consenting, but you're actually responding to a lie. And that's where the concept of consent becomes essential, because without truth, there can be no real choice.
As Joyce Short and Nina Lucas taught us, deception and consent cannot coexist. Joyce defines consent as a freely given, knowledgeable, and informed agreement by a person with the capacity to reason. That word informed is everything. If someone lies about what they're offering, your agreement isn't real. You're not consenting. You're being defrauded. Think of it like Bernie Madoff's investors. They agreed to invest, but they didn't consent to being scammed. In NXIVM, we believed we were choosing empowerment, growth, and purpose. In reality, Ranieri's lies and others who enforced the lies stole our ability to consent. If NXIVM had wanted real informed consent, their invitation would have sounded like this. Join us so we can exploit you emotionally, sexually, spiritually, and financially. Who would knowingly agree to that? In NXIVM, we believed we were choosing growth. And that's exactly why lies are the backbone of undue influence. They make manipulation look like choice. So how do we know when influence crosses the line? That's where Dr. Stephen Hassan's influence continuum comes in. It maps influence on a spectrum, from ethical and consensual to coercive and destructive. On the healthy end, influence is transparent, respectful, and empowering. It supports your autonomy. A good coach pushing you to train harder belongs here. You've agreed to that relationship and you can leave any time. On the unhealthy end, influence becomes deceptive and manipulative. It hides true motives, limits your freedom, and punishes dissent. That's undue influence, and it's inherently non-consensual. Understanding where someone or something falls on this continuum helps us recognize the difference between guidance and control, between a supportive mentor and a cult leader. And knowing that difference can keep you from mistaking coercion for connection. Let's take a break from the cultiverse, shall we? Here's a word from our sponsors.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. We are shockingly good at talking about mental health these days. Podcasts, group chats, and that one friend who's basically become a therapy evangelist. Everybody's got one. BetterHelp's 2026 State of Stigma report surveyed 2,000 Americans that revealed that 85% of Americans believe getting support is wise, yet 74% say society discourages people from doing so. We nod along. We agree wholeheartedly. We say things like therapy's so important, while sipping coffee like we're very enlightened. Then someone suggests we go to therapy and suddenly we're too busy, or it's probably fine, or it'll work itself out. Or my personal favorite, I'll deal with it eventually. Eventually being a mythical time period that never arrives until you find yourself in a cult or a high control group or some other coercive situation. Been there, done that. BetterHelp's research confirms it. We believe in mental health support more than we actually seek it. We'll gladly diagnose our friends' entire lives, but somehow that same energy never turns inwards. Very on brand for us as a society. Here's the thing though, BetterHelp makes the eventually part to disappear. Fully licensed therapists in the US, strict code of conduct, and they do all the matching legwork with a quick questionnaire. 12 plus years of experience means they basically nail it on the first try. Didn't click? You can switch anytime. No awkward breakup conversation required. So maybe it's time to take our own advice instead of just doling it out for free like some unlicensed guru. Don't let stigma stand in the way of support. Start therapy with BetterHelp. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/culty. That's betterhelp.com/culty.
If the world were like a Sleep Number mattress, everything would adapt for your comfort. Your coffee would never get cold. Your flight would always be on time. And your mattress would always respond to you and your unique sleep needs. Sleep Number mattresses are designed to respond to your body and shift with your changing life, helping you fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. To experience a whole new world of comfort, visit a Sleep Number store or go to sleepnumber.com. Sleep Number, to a good night's sleep.
Escape's over. Let's return to our regularly scheduled cult talk.
Another framework that helped us make sense of what happened to us comes from Dr. Janja Lalich. Her book, Take Back Your Life, quickly became our go-to recommendation for anyone recovering from a high-control group. Dr. Lalich isn't just a cult expert. She's also a survivor. In the 1970s, she spent over a decade in the Democratic Workers' Party, a San Francisco-based Marxist-Leninist political cult that promised a socialist utopia but delivered rigid control and exploitation. Her experience fuels her work. Dr. Lalich defines a cult as a social group or movement that is held together through a shared commitment to a charismatic leader and transcendent belief system, which may or may not be religious. In her model, a set of ideas or beliefs offer members a sense of ultimate meaning, purpose, or spiritual truth, and have the answers to everything, past, present, and future. This ideology could be religious, but it can also be secular, such as a belief in a utopian society, a revolutionary political ideology, or even a belief in the leader's unique wisdom or abilities. These groups require high levels of personal commitment from their members, often demanding significant changes in behavior and lifestyle. Dr. Lalich's framework isn't just an abstract theory. It's a tool that helps us recognize how cult dynamics operate in surprising places. Take 7M, a Los Angeles-based TikTok dance collective led by Robert Shin. On the surface, it looks like an agency helping talented dancers build careers. But when we apply Lalich's model, the group reveals itself as a textbook cult in disguise. At 7M, the transcendent belief system was the idea that God had chosen this specific group of dancers to carry out his work through TikTok fame and global visibility. Robert Shin convinced them that their talent was divine evidence that they were anointed to spread God's message through dance. He positioned himself as God's appointed guide, meaning that loyalty to him was synonymous with loyalty to God. Shin framed every like, follow, and viral hit as spiritual confirmation of God's favor. To obey Shin meant more than just learning or being disciplined. It was faith. Giving up family, money, or freedom was not a sacrifice, but a sacred act showing faith and ensuring one's place in God's plan. This transcendent belief system gave Shin extraordinary leverage. He convinced members that their artistic dreams were indistinguishable from their spiritual salvation. That fusion of ambition and faith created a totalizing worldview in which there was only one righteous path: obedience to Shin and 7M. Suppression of dissent. In Lalich's model, questioning the leader is forbidden. At 7M, doubts about Shin were treated as betrayal, not only of the community, but of God himself. Ex-members describe how even small criticisms about money, schedules, or living conditions were reframed as spiritual weakness or demonic influence. Shin positioned himself as the sole interpreter of divine will, with every concern answered by the same prescription: trust more, obey more, believe more. Over time, members internalized the silencing, fearing both punishment and spiritual condemnation. Systems of control. Cults exert control over daily life, finances, and relationships. At 7M, Shin dictated nearly every dimension of members' lives. Dancers lived in group housing provided by Shin, performed on schedules set by leadership, and saw their earnings funneled back into the organization. Romantic relationships were discouraged unless approved, and family ties were cut off if they posed a distraction from the mission. What was marketed as mentorship was in fact a system of dependency that stripped members of autonomy. Many survivors now call it what it was: labor trafficking dressed up as spiritual opportunity. Mind-altering practices. Lalich points out that cults use repetitive practices to weaken independent thought. At 7M, this took the form of long hours of prayer, scripture study, and so-called spiritual training, paired with grueling dance rehearsals that left members exhausted. What seemed like faith-building was really a process of indoctrination, draining members' critical capacity, reinforcing loyalty to Shin, and embedding the belief that any flicker of doubt was a personal or spiritual failure. Elitism and separatism. Finally, Lalich emphasizes the us versus them mindset. At 7M, dancers were told they were chosen vessels, set apart from the outside world. Family and friends who expressed concern were dismissed as spiritually blind, incapable of understanding the mission. This elitism bred both pride and fear: pride in being part of an elite group, and fear of losing that status and salvation by leaving the group. Shin weaponized this separatism to isolate dancers, ensuring the only people who truly understood them were inside the group. The big picture. The tactics that Lalich describes are easy to spot in compounds or fundamentalist churches, but harder to recognize in a sleek TikTok dance troupe. That's what makes 7M so insidious. Through Lalich's lens, it becomes clear that 7M, which is still active, isn't just a creative collective, but a full-blown cult. One that takes the dreams of ambitious young dancers, reframes them as divine destiny, and uses that belief to extract loyalty, labor, and money. 7M proves that cultic dynamics don't only thrive in remote communes, they can just as easily flourish in digital spaces, exploiting creativity under the guise of opportunity.
Cults of one. As we continue to explore cults, their leaders, and their tactics, you will find common patterns. In fact, a cult of one refers to an abusive relationship between a controlling person and their victim, coach-athlete, therapist-client, director-actor, teacher-student, husband-wife. Sometimes this dynamic extends beyond a single victim, such as in a family where one dominant figure controls multiple members, aka family cults. Whether it's one victim, a few members, or many followers in a large group, the tactics are the same and always dangerous. Actress Evan Rachel Wood's experience with Brian Warner, professionally known as Marilyn Manson, is a chilling example of a cult of one. When Evan was 18, an idealistic and emerging talent, she met Brian, a 36-year-old musician and powerful public figure. This age gap and the power dynamic set the stage for a deeply manipulative relationship. Initially, Brian showered Evan with intense affection. He made her feel special, like she was the most important person in his world. He manipulatively pretended to place her on a pedestal, praising her excessively and creating the illusion of adoration and respect. The relationship moved at an alarming pace, with declarations of love and commitment happening very early on. It was a whirlwind of attention and validation that swept Evan off her feet. Brian simultaneously isolated Evan, creating an us-against-the-world mentality. He made her feel like their relationship was unique and misunderstood by outsiders, driving a wedge between her and her support system. He mirrored her interests and personality traits, creating a false sense of deep connection. He then abused Evan in horrendous ways, physically, emotionally, and sexually, all covered in her documentary Phoenix Rising. Evan later described this psychological manipulation as having infected your everything, heart, mind, and body.
Your culty cheat sheet on cult terms and models. Let's recap what we know about cults so far. Hassan's bite model of authoritarian control. Behavior control. You must do what you are told to do. Follow our rules, or else. Information control. You must only interact with cult-approved information and never question the leader. Thought control. Don't think for yourself. Adopt our worldview without question. Emotional control. You're kept loyal and obedient through fear, shame, and guilt. Only show approved emotions. Ignore or bury all other emotions. Undue influence. The use of deception to create the illusion that you are in control and making your own choices. Consent as informed agreement. Consent must include all the information you need to make the best decision for yourself. Proper consent requires honesty, deception, and validates it. The influence continuum. Not all influence is bad. Some influence is harmless. Where to find the best pizza in town. Some is positive. Brush your teeth. And some is harmful. Try cocaine, rob a bank, hand over your life savings, or become my spiritual wife. Dr. Yanya Lalich's model. All cults have a belief system and expect excessive devotion. Dissent is suppressed. The members' daily lives are micromanaged and fully controlled. The cult uses mind-altering practices. Could be drugs, could be meditation. Members are urged to view themselves as select and better than others. Even cult podcasts need sponsors. Check out these must-haves.
If the world were like a Sleep Number mattress, everything would adapt for your comfort. Your coffee would never get cold. Your flight would always be on time. And your mattress would always respond to you and your unique sleep needs. Sleep Number mattresses are designed to respond to your body and shift with your changing life, helping you fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. To experience a whole new world of comfort, visit a Sleep Number store or go to sleepnumber.com. Sleep Number. To a good life's sleep.
Thank you, sponsors. We couldn't do it without you. Now let's get back to the show.
Chapter 4. Who starts cults and why? When you ask non-experts about why people join cults, you often hear the term charismatic leader. And most cults do have a charismatic leader. But not all charismatic leaders are cult leaders. Charisma can be used with both good and bad intent. Many charming thought leaders are doing good work. Few leaders can get people to follow them without charisma. Many people have asked us, what drew us to KR, given that he didn't really pass the aesthetic charisma test. He was a 5'7", schlumpy man with a stocky dad bod. Throw in some knee pads, and you have an instant chick repellent, or so we thought. However, other aspects of his cultivated persona contributed to his allure. Let's break it down.
Charismatic leaders often have a magnetic personality that draws people in on multiple levels. They tend to be articulate, confident, and able to present their ideas in a compelling way. Charismatic people make you feel better about yourself when you're around them. Charisma, or Riz as they say these days, has gotten a bad rap because it's often linked with narcissism. But what does narcissism actually mean? How does this personality trait manifest in the world of cults? Narcissism is a trait that, when extreme, becomes a disorder that drives cult leaders' manipulation. To peel back the layers of a narcissist's modus operandi, we spoke to Dr. Ramani Durvasala, a renowned clinical psychologist and author. She explained that narcissism exists on a spectrum, from everyday narcissists who are a bit self-absorbed to malignant narcissists who are outright destructive. Dangerous narcissists often have a mix of psychopathic traits, making them willing to exploit and manipulate others. Cult leaders fall squarely into the malignant category. Their charisma, or KR's fake humility and pseudo-intellectualism, draws people in. Underneath the narcissist's charismatic mask lies a hunger for power, control, and admiration. Then they exploit their victims, demand unwavering loyalty, and gaslight followers to maintain their grip. Dr. Ramani points out that cult leaders have a warped sense of superiority, think the rules don't apply to them, and do whatever they want. They disregard the well-being of their followers, focusing solely on their own twisted desires. The worst part? This narcissistic behavior can be contagious, creating a toxic environment where the most ardent followers mimic the leader, creating a top-down system of abuse that ripples through the group. Dan Shaw, a cult survivor, licensed clinical social worker, psychoanalyst, and author, offers another perspective on the narcissistic puzzle. Narcissists are wounded individuals driven by their own unresolved trauma, trying to heal their pain by filling their emptiness with power. Shaw emphasized that these leaders use their charisma to create an illusion of enlightenment or specialness, hooking followers who crave those things. They position themselves as the embodiment of perfection, making any questioning or dissent a personal attack. To top it off, they project their own deep-seated shame and fear into their followers, creating an atmosphere of constant emotional turmoil that keeps everyone walking on eggshells.
Teal Swan, the self-proclaimed spiritual guru with a knack for hypnotic YouTube videos, is a prime example of narcissism in action. She has even boasted that she'll be bigger than the Pope. On the surface, her spiritual and self-help teachings might seem harmless, even quirky. But dig deeper, and there's a dark side. She believes she's the ultimate fix for anyone's trauma, depression, or suicidal ideations. And she's a pro at exploiting vulnerabilities, preying on people's pain to build her empire and milking her followers for every last cent. She spins wild, debunked stories about her past to cement her mystique. One of Teal's most outrageous claims is that she was a victim of satanic ritual abuse as a child, a narrative she's peddled to paint herself as a survivor with unique insight into trauma. Investigative journalist Jennings Brown dug into her claims and found no corroborating evidence. Former friends and family members, including those close to her during her childhood, have publicly disputed her account, calling it a fabrication. Jennings shared with us a chilling example of Teal's lack of empathy. He described a 2017 retreat where a suicidal woman wanted to leave early. Teal's first concern was how it might affect her brand. Jennings caught Teal fretting about her image on tape while this woman was spiraling. That's not empathy. That's a narcissist, obsessed with her own spotlight. Teal's not even a licensed therapist. Zero formal training in psychology or psychiatry, yet she's dishing out advice on depression, trauma, even suicide. Insensitive to the weight of these topics. The fallout's real, and people have allegedly died under her guidance.
Pseudoscience? Neuro-linguistic programming. Cult leaders love pseudoscience. Neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, is a communication-based approach that claims to improve mental health, communication, and personal success. While most psychologists agree that NLP lacks solid scientific support, Some coaches and therapists find aspects of it helpful when used ethically and with informed consent. But that's not how cult leaders use it. In manipulative environments, NLP becomes a powerful weapon of influence, applied without consent or transparency to bypass critical thinking and gain control over others. NLP is based on 3 ideas: neuro, the brain; linguistic, language; and programming, how thoughts and habits can be changed. Think of it like computer code for the mind. If you can rewrite someone's mental software, you can influence how they think, feel, and behave. In ethical contexts, NLP might be used to improve communication or build confidence. In the wrong hands, it becomes a subtle system of control that shapes emotions and decisions without awareness. NLP was a perfect fit for KR, flashy enough to sound scientific and vague enough to avoid scrutiny. He used its most recognizable tools, rapport building, mirroring, and anchoring, to draw people in, create emotional dependency, and quietly steer behavior. To build rapport, KR mirrored people's posture, tone, and speech patterns. He used deep eye contact and sometimes hand-holding to create a sense of being profoundly seen. Almost every ex-member we spoke with said the same thing. When he was with you, he was with you. Mirroring and anchoring are part of the same system for creating subconscious connections, not separate tricks. Anchoring links an external stimulus, like a gesture, tone, or touch, to a specific emotional state. Once the link is created, repeating the stimulus triggers the associated emotion. KR used this to tie loyalty, trust, and submission to himself. This wasn't limited to private interactions. NXIVM's state modules taught us to deliberately trigger emotions using physical cues. Sidebar, I personally found the state modules incredibly helpful. Nippy would always be somewhere else when these modules were being taught. He hated teaching them and hated doing them. This concept is still under debate. Okay, back to the book. Ostensibly, this was to help us manage our own emotional states, but it also created an ecosystem of psychological conditioning, training us to respond predictably in ways that served KR's agenda. KR intensified his use of NLP techniques with his inner circle. The branding ceremony in DOS, where women were seared with his initials, became a physical and psychological anchor that tied allegiance to pain and submission. Even after everything, some branded women remain loyal to their vanguard, a chilling example of devotion forged through manipulation. As with most cult leaders, KR's endgame wasn't limited to followers. He used NLP to engineer rapport with influential outsiders also. If you watch The Vow, there's a scene where KR meets the Dalai Lama that perfectly illustrates this technique. His body language subtly matches His Holiness's posture, rhythm, and tone, projecting empathy and alignment. The effect is persuasive. The Dalai Lama ultimately visits Albany, lending NXIVM a veneer of legitimacy that KR and his team quickly exploited. And the indoctrination ran deep. We were taught these same NLP tools as coaching skills, encouraged to use mirroring and anchoring to connect with new recruits. It seemed harmless, even empowering, but in reality, it was a system of influence, training us to replicate KR's manipulation style under the guise of self-improvement.
I recall an incident where 4 of us were in what we called a breakout group discussing a topic, and one woman in our group was highly emotional while expressing her perspective. KR happened to be in the room, and he walked by and gently touched her shoulder and in a whisper said, "Try saying it softly." The woman burst into tears. At the time, I remember thinking that was a type of intimate touch of 2 people who were in a sexual relationship. And why did she burst into tears? It felt off to me. About a year later, I found out that she was in his harem and had been branded with his initials, even though she was a married woman. I had dismissed my instinctive response because I didn't know about the subtle nuances and loaded history behind a simple touch of the shoulder. Strong connections usually develop through communication and self-expression. Cult leaders often use language to enthrall and convince, presenting themselves as alluring and beyond question, even when they're extreme. In the same way that politicians present a persona or an image of shared values to vote for, cult leaders like KR are highly skilled at cosplaying an enlightened Gandhi figure. KR, a middle-class nerd from upstate New York, skillfully parroted the humanitarian philosophies of spiritual teachers as his own. He used obscure anecdotes and specific mannerisms to appear professorial. He would only speak in public forums on rare occasions, so the NXIVM community would scramble, dropping whatever they were doing to attend and hang on his every word. The rarity of these events added to his mystique. Not only were the forums infrequent, Teams of eager listeners documented them with clipboards and stopwatches to record timestamps. Every person was assigned a topic to capture his wisdom and quotes under categories such as humor or philosophy. We were building a library of KR's genius, and nobody wanted to miss a beat. Bruh. KR's manufactured image as a wise, humble professor was designed to give him ultimate authority. This was fortified by an unverified bio with grandiose claims about his IQ, physical accolades, and business ventures. He proclaimed to dominate all fields and said that he was a concert pianist, chess master, and judo champ when he was 10. We heard him playing one song on the piano, never saw him play chess, and I never got to test his judo skills. Lucky for KR. He boasted that he was the first triple major to graduate from Rensselaer Polytech Institute. We found out later that he was on academic probation with a 2.6 GPA. Thank you, Vanguard. Let's not forget his assertion that he was in the Guinness Book of World Records for only 1 year after completing a Mensa IQ test. Early defectors later told us that this was a take-home test, which he completed with the help of his harem. Oh, the irony. This fraud was the backbone of his claim to be one of the top 3 problem solvers of the world. Looking back, it's crazy how boldly he sold these lies. Every claim was easily verifiable, but no one checked. That's the confidence of a true con man. Sadly, most people don't fact-check their gurus. We sure didn't. We rode the trust train and put KR on a pedestal, 5th grade judo champion and all, creating a hierarchy where his words went unquestioned. Without realizing it, we became part of the machine that upheld his false image, and in doing so, we validated his fake authority for others. We're truly sorry about that, and we're still cleaning up that mess.
KR used his denouncement of materialism as a virtue, presenting himself as a celibate, renunciate, monk-like leader. Conversely, Bentinho Massaro, a self-styled spiritual master, spouts enlightenment and self-actualization mixed with seductive visions of wealth. In Bentinho's world, you can be enlightened, own a Porsche, and smoke cigars. His brand is flashy and appeals to younger, jet-setting wanderlusters. Bentinho wears bespoke suits, pontificating like an ascended master. He presents like Hugh Hefner, sitting poolside and discussing fourth-density consciousness with an accent that seems to be shifting slightly depending on his audience. Bentinho hides behind nebulous terms like parallel realities and distortions. His claims that only he understands these terms at the deepest level creates a sense of awe amongst his yoga-legging-clad devotees. Bentinho hooks new members by building his flashy community online and uses elaborate parties, travel to exotic locations, and promises of spiritual advancement to attract and retain them. Through social media platforms, Bentinho skillfully built a digital presence that showcases his energetic and magnetic speaking style. This widespread accessibility makes him appear modern, relatable, and engaging. But this is a trap to exploit his victims and fund his expensive lifestyle. It's the ultimate grift. There's an old joke that religion is just a cult where the leader is dead. And while that's oversimplified, it makes an important point. People often dismiss the idea that their group is a cult because it doesn't have a single charismatic leader. But in most cases, someone is still pulling the strings, whether it's a living figurehead, a small inner circle, or even a dead leader whose teachings are carried on by loyal gatekeepers. When the founder is gone, others step into that role, ensuring that the hierarchy and control continues. The question of whether cult leaders actually believe their own rhetoric is trickier. Since most of them don't line up to be psychoanalyzed, they refuse to be in conversations they can't control, we're left with case studies. What history shows us is that some cult leaders began with good intentions and lost their way, while others had exploitation baked in from the very beginning. Some appear to believe their own mythology, sometimes fueled by psychosis or delusion, while others knowingly con their followers for power, money, or sex. And the most dangerous ones do both at the same time. They are delusional and are knowingly conning people.
Regardless of a leader's intentions, cults revolve around a shared ideology. As Lalich explained, all cults have a transcendent belief system, a set of ideas framed so noble, urgent, or world-changing that followers feel compelled to devote themselves completely. In plain terms, the ideology is the bait to lure new members. Without it, what would the cult even be selling? Of course, everyone has an ideology. You might believe that hard work brings success, capitalist ideology, or that we are all equal, humanist ideology. Ideologies are the frameworks we live by, church-based, financially based, family-based, or otherwise. The difference between a healthy ideology and a cult ideology is transparency and flexibility. Non-cult ideologies are open to questioning and amendment. Cult ideologies are absolutist, rigid, and wielded to control. Belief systems themselves are natural and can be healthy. Shared values bond us, give purpose, and help communities thrive. Problems arise, however, when dogma is more important than human life and ideology is used to harm people. Here are some red flags. When the group bond creates an us versus them mentality, elevates members as special or diminishes outsiders. When a single person claims to know what's best for everyone and enforces this knowledge through manipulation or shame. Or when the group mission begins to justify silencing, threatening, or harming dissenters. Historically, these behaviors lead to exclusion, shunning, harm, and even violence. In religious settings, this is called labeling someone an apostate, a term used to brand those who leave or question the faith as traitors, reinforcing the group's us versus them mentality. A narcissistic leader positions themselves as the living embodiment of the mission, the one who knows all. In a transcendent system, this isn't just about influence or authority, it's about ultimate control. The leader holds someone's life in their hands, their salvation, their happiness, their sense of purpose, and sometimes even their physical safety. The ideology becomes all-encompassing, providing a framework that dictates what they must do to survive and what could lead to harm or exclusion. This system is so dangerous, obedience becomes a matter of survival. Leaders weaponize the mission and their authority to manipulate followers, ensuring unquestioning loyalty, devotion, and compliance with the rules of the group.
Your culty cheat sheet on leaders and ideologies. We highly recommend not following one person or becoming totally devoted to a group. No one person or group has all the answers. For all you learners and seekers out there, do your research on the background or resume of the leader or group in question. Ask yourself the following questions. Do they claim to have the one and only answer you need? Are they loving and then flip to criticism? Do they discourage your independence in thought, actions, and emotions? Are their grandiose claims supported by any peer-reviewed research? Do their accolades seem too good to be true? Are there lawsuits against them? How do they handle criticism or dissent? Do they shift the rules, or are the rules hard to grasp? Do they subtly or overtly isolate you from friends and family? How do they treat people who leave? Do they verbally denigrate or shun them? Are they all charm and no empathy? Are there blatant inconsistencies in their behavior versus their teachings, i.e., do they walk the walk? Do they stare into your eyes while listening intently? Do they organize extensive celebrations around their birthdays, like NXIVM's 10-day V-Week for the Vanguard? Finally, are there a bunch of starry-eyed followers surrounding them, singing praises, swearing the leader can do no wrong? Always maintain a healthy skepticism. Question extraordinary claims and be cautious of anyone who discourages critical thinking or accessing outside information. Remember, valid science-backed practitioners, therapists, counselors, and psychotherapists are bound by strict ethical codes, including informed consent, confidentiality, and never engaging in sexual or exploitative relationships with clients. Cult leaders operate under no such rules. If any coach, mentor, or therapist offers to help you by establishing a romantic or sexual relationship, run.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
We hope you're enjoying A Little Bit Culty. If so, please do show us some love. Drop a rating or leave a review. Hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/alittlebitculty.
Even better, send this episode to someone who needs it. Maybe they're in a cult. Maybe they're just a little bit susceptible. Or maybe they just love a good story. Spread the word, spread the love. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production.
Executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames in collaboration with producer Will Rutherford at Citizens of Sound. Our co-creator is Jess Temple Tardy.
Our production coordinator is Leslie Dinsmore.
Writing by Sandra Namoto and social media marketing by Eric Swarzinski and Brooke Keene.
Our theme song, Cultivated, is by the artists John Bryant and Nigel Aslan.
the world were like a Sleep Number mattress, everything would adapt for your comfort. Your coffee would never get cold. Your flight would always be on time. And your mattress would always respond to you and your unique sleep needs. Sleep Number mattresses are designed to respond to your body and shift with your changing life, helping you fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. To experience a whole new world of comfort, visit a Sleep Number store or go to sleepnumber.com. Sleep Number, to a good life sleep.